All right. Hey, Miller Thomas, our mutual friend and fellow Locked On MLB podcaster, Stacy Gatsoulias, who
Yes.
was actually the person who dragged me into this whole Locked On world a couple of
Oh,
years
really?
ago.
That's funny.
She's written a great piece. It's available on WUSA9.com. We'll put a link for it on our respective Twitter pages, talking about the best remaining free agents by position. We're going to give Stacy a shout out on this, but I'll also give Peter Pratt a shout out on this, the host of Locked On Marlins, because we've been saying this whole off season what the Marlins should do because they have the pitching staff, and now they have the American League batting champion with still a decent pitching staff. You're basically swapping Johnny Cueto for Pablo Lopez at this point. If you can have decent starting pitching, and if you put a major leaguer at every position, you have a decent chance of at least breaking even, at least having, winning 81, 82 games. I look at Cleveland, same thing. You look around and say, like, hey, look at, you can pitch. Cleveland actually has a great pitching staff. And if they just had a major leaguer at every position, blah, blah, blah. So let's open up her article right over here. My setup here, it looks like Minority Report with all these different screens I have going on here. Again, oh God, I got to get these references that you can understand. Yeah. Let's go through what Stacy said are the best, according, and this is great what they did using Fangraphs WAR, which you and I are not beholden to WAR, but I treat WAR like Wikipedia. It's a good starting off. If you're doing research, it's a good starting off point. And what they did there, which I did appreciate, is combining the WAR from 2021 and 2022. So taking advantage of the fact that someone may have either had injuries or a down year or something like that. Let's taking into account the last two seasons, who are the best at each position. She has at catcher Gary Sanchez, who he burst onto the scene looking like a potential superstar. And now he is just floating in. It's hit 16 home runs, but slash 205, 282, 377 with Minnesota last year. And has had, only marginal success as a catcher. But he's available out there. And he does have some pop. I mean, he's not the superstar he looked like when he burst onto the scene, but I think if you want a right-handed DH occasional catcher, you could do a lot worse than have someone like Gary Sanchez on your team.
Yeah, that's probably what he is at this point of his career. Real quick side note, I believe we are seeing the ending days of the WAR stat being used. I think it has a shelf life of like a couple more years. WRC Plus is starting to come in on its corner and take over. And I like that stat a lot better than like WAR. No more WAR. It's finally over. Just wanted to get that off my chest real quick. But Gary Sanchez.
WAR. Huh. What is it good for? Absolutely. Just as it's good for some initial research on a player and everything. I don't want to get us in trouble with the sabermetrics crowd who if you dare say anything bad about WAR.
That's going to be my new thing. Every time you say a reference I don't understand, I'm just going to do that little signal for the YouTube audience going right over my head.
Okay, that's a classic song from the 60s anyway.
Oh, yeah, that's the 60s. Sully.
That's before my time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. But yeah, when you think about like Gary Sanchez's like career trajectory, like you mentioned, it's crazy to think about because he burst onto the scene. He was a two-time All-Star with the New York Yankees back in 2014 and 2016, where he looked like the best, or 2017, 2019, where he looked like the best power hitting catcher in baseball and put up an insane slash line, had over 800 OPS, was a 30 home run guy, and looked like he was going to be Posada plus. I think that's what Stacy wrote in her article. Like he looked like he was going to be the next great homegrown star by the Yankees, a middle of the order bat from your catcher. Like we thought maybe Gary Sanchez was going to be the best offensive catcher, maybe since a Buster Posey, maybe a Joe Mauer. And at this point, like you said, he should just be a platoon power pop because his biggest issue is his strikeouts. he's a strikeout machine, and he was even a strikeout machine when he was the two-time All-Star. But when you bat near 300 with an 800 plus OPS, you can make up for it. But when you bat 205 with a 282 OBP and a 377 slugging, you can't have 150 strikeouts or 40 walks at that point. So he just become too much of a negative at this point of his career. Like, I don't know. And he's still super young. Like, that's the thing about Gary Sanchez. He's going to turn 30. He's either 30 or he just turned 30 December 2nd. So he's not even like a guy that's like super old, still in the prime of his career, can still provide that power pop from the right side of the plate. But is it worth it? Is he basically just a Joey Gallo at this point? Like, he's basically just a right-handed Joey Gallo. Like, what's the difference between those two players?
But imagine, let me ask you a question here. Where did Gallo land?
This offseason?
Yeah,
I don't even remember.
But imagine if you have someone who's has left-handed pop, and you have Sanchez to be right-handed pop. You could Voltron. Do you know Voltron? Is that over your head? Okay, you could Voltron that into a decent designated hitter spot.
You can do that. It just depends on the money, I guess, because Gary Sanchez, if you're getting him for like 5 to 8 million, you're probably okay with it. But if he's asking for like 12 to 15, like, that's way too expensive for a guy of Gary Sanchez who just doesn't do enough for you at the plate right now outside of over the fence power.
Well, I mean, but here's what I'll say about that. What I'll say about that is the fact that if he's still unsigned now, then he may be it's going to be February next week.
Yeah.
He may be in full, geez, I need to get somewhere. I need to sign somewhere. I need to reprove myself somewhere. And I'm sorry. I mean, if you're looking for top dollar and you're unemployed in February, maybe you shouldn't stop. Maybe you should stop looking for top dollar and start trying to find the job that will make you look the best.
Yeah, once we get around spring training, there's going to be injuries. There's going to be other things for these remaining free agents to sign with contenders and other teams. Like, teams are going to start making moves. Some of these guys are just going to have to wait until probably opening day, right before opening day, to get signed. That happens sometimes with free agents because there's still quality. I don't know how I said that word, quality. There's still quality dudes out there on this free agent market that we're going to talk about.
Yuli Gurriel is listed as the best available first baseman at this point. I look at a team like the Twins, who just saw their first base production go way down with the trade of Arise to the Miami Marlins. I look at Gurriel, who, it didn't have a great season last year, but has been a solid player, has multiple World Series appearances, and has had some big hits, and not all of them have been trash can aided. And if I'm looking for, again, a flyer on someone to come in and who has been there and done that for a team that has aspirations of winning, I think Minnesota and Yuli Gurriel seem like a perfect fit for each other.
Yeah, and it seems like, I think there's been some rumors that he's been linked to Miami as well. We know a team that's been starving for offense. I think Gurriel's biggest issue is just probably his lack of production from last year combined with his age. This is someone that's like 39 years old. So if you're bringing him in, you have to very temper your expectations. Maybe you're only expecting 80 to 90 games. I think, like you said, he's perfect for a young team trying to build toward the playoffs. Adam, as a veteran presence, still has maybe a little bit of pop, always been a good contact hitter. You just want to hope that you could get somewhere in terms of production between what he did last season and the year before, because obviously he's not going to be an all-star level player anymore, but I also don't think he's as bad as what we saw last year. So if you could kind of get a mix of what you saw the last 2 seasons for Yuli Gurriel, he's going to be a great flyer for somebody. I probably like him a little bit more than even a Gary Sanchez.
Let's go up the middle. You could have the combination of Josh Harrison and Elvis Andrus right there. Put that right up the middle. A couple of years ago, you've been salivated for something like that. I think Harrison, who, Stacey makes a point that he hits for contact and is an okay hitter, which sometimes if you're a team, like I look at the Red Sox with gigantic holes in their infield, having Josh Harrison as a stopgap or Elvis Andrus as a stopgap is not the worst thing in the world, quite frankly. I also look at the San Francisco Giants, who have some issues with their infield as well, both with, departures and age and, some players who didn't quite work out, I think both Andrus and Harrison, both of them who played for Chicago last year, as a stopgap. Obviously, none of these are long-term solutions, but as a stopgap, you can go a lot worse than fill it in with these two guys who have had excellent seasons in the past.
Yeah, these are bridge players. These are pace players. You just need them to hold it down until you find the right piece, either through free agency, through trade, or until you call somebody up, right? When we talk about the Boston Red Sox, everyone says, oh, it's okay that they got rid of Xander because we got Marcelo Mayer coming up in 2 years. Well, guess what? They currently don't have anybody manning that position, so they should go out there and get an Elvis Andrus or Josh Harrison, because when I was reading Stacey's article and I saw a 5 WAR next to Elvis Andrus, I almost fell out my seat, Sully, because I did not expect him to have that high of a WAR, considering he's super old. And I feel like he hasn't been super productive the last few years, but I looked at his stats. They weren't fantastic, but he had like 17 home runs and like 18 stolen bases last year. Like, he's got some pop, he's got some speed. And if you're a team like the Boston Red Sox, like, you could probably do worse than Elvis Andrus. Like, I think nobody is probably worse than Elvis Andrus. So it's like, why not sign these players if you have that need? Because all these remaining players on the free agent market, they're not going to break the bank. They're just going to be happy to get signed.
Yeah. Like someone like Donovan Solano, who she has at third base, to me just screams Tampa Bay Rays. This is a guy who is going to wind up being super inexpensive, was really good a couple of years ago, not so good now. Has played a little bit here, a little infield at second base and at first base. I'm just picturing him going to be with the Rays, and he'll wind up putting together like an OPS in the 800s, and people are like, how the hell did this happen? Oh, who the heck did Don? This is like the type of player that Tampa usually just salivates over, and be like, oh man, yeah, I forgot about this guy, and he'll wind up having one very good season, and then a team like the Brewers will sign him to a 4-year deal and overpay, and he'll get hurt, and his great grandkids can go to law school on the Milwaukee Brewers. But the Rays got that one good year sort of stuck in there, and I just look at that.
Yeah, Solano is the perfect kind of guy. If you're a team that's just starving for contact hitters, you just need someone that could put the ball in play and get on base for you, maybe move runners over. Because if you look at Solano, the last 4 years, starting in 2019 with his batting average, starting in 2019, 330, then 326, 280, 284. This is someone that could just straight up hit, and maybe he doesn't have the power, maybe he doesn't have the speed, but just adding someone that is not going to be a negative at the plate, be smart with their pitches, has a good approach to the game. That's a positive player in your lineup. And I would probably, like, we keep going back to Gary Sanchez. Like, if it's Sanchez or Solano, like, yeah, if I need that over the fence power, give me Sanchez. But if I'm just in a situation where I got the boppers, I just need someone that can get a hit, get a single, so my boppers could bring him home, then give me Solano.
By the way, speaking of someone who we talk about Tampa Bay, and you're from Locked On Arizona, David Peralta still doesn't have a home now. Stacey pointed out the fact that the Dodgers have been kicking the tires on him for a little bit. And we forget the Dodgers, they won I think they won 170 games last year. And yet they lost it seems like they did. And then they got just bamboozled by San Diego in the division series. I still can't believe that happened. The Dodgers have more holes on their team than you think they do. And yeah, they have a fertile farm system and they have some great players on there, but Peralta strikes me as a player who will probably wind up on a team like LA that you look up and go like, oh, wow, yeah, I forgot about him. And you'll have that he'll probably do fine. He'll probably do just fine. Or he could end up in San Francisco, or he could wind up, with St. Louis. But I think, Stacey pointed out the Dodgers. I think he's a good fit for the Dodgers as a short-term sort of bridge pickup.
I don't know why, but hearing fertile farm system gave me a little bit of an ick there. But for David Peralta, freight train, this is someone still a good defensive player in left field, borderline Gold Glove winner last season. And he's someone that can still produce in the middle of your lineup as a clutch hitter. He doesn't really have the over the fence power like he used to, but you look at his number.
Did you just mute yourself?
Yeah, I accidentally got muted. I think my mic got disconnected.
I had to mute you. I didn't like what you were saying. I did.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so for David Peralta, he's still an elite veteran presence, can still make those. Oh, it was because I remember now what the tangent I was about to go on. It's because I was going to talk about the RBI, Sully. People don't care about the RBI anymore.
Nope.
I almost got muted by MLB conspiracy or MLB government because no one wants to talk about the RBI. I believe there's an art to an RBI. Yes, if you have all-stars in your lineup who are going to get on base, it's a lot easier to juice up your stats with RBIs. But guess what? There's also players that just are clutch, have that gene, and when they see a man on second, when they see a man on third, they know how to put the ball in play. They know how to bring that guy home. And David Peralta, freight train, is one of those guys. Not everyone is great runners in scoring position. Those are high pressure moments, and David Peralta is someone that I've always trusted when he did it for the D-backs and came up in those situations.
Speaking about someone with a little bit of pop, just sort of bouncing around here, looks like Luke Voigt is still available.
Disgusting.
Luke is
That's your guy right there.
He can hit some out of the park. He's not going to do much for you. He has no value in the field. But if you're a team that has no power, I'm looking at you, Cleveland. I'm looking at you, Miami. I'm looking at you, Pittsburgh. Hell, I'm looking at you, Boston, with very little power on your team. You take your chances, especially if you can pair him with a left-handed bat. People are kind of using the DH as a spot to sort of cycle in, it's like a rotating pinch hitter. But I don't know. I like a player like Voigt if it means some a little bit of pop.
He's another Gary Sanchez-esque player because you look at his stats from last season, the 22 home runs in 135 games, that makes you feel really good. And then you see 55 walks to 179 strikeouts. He's another Joey Gallo, Gary Sanchez-esque player. Great pop, can do it as a DH, but you probably don't want to play him 150 games because it's going to be a negative in that the more you play him, the more of a negative he's going to be. If you play him for 80 games and you get those 20 home runs in those 80 games just as a DH platoon guy, then I think you're healthy. Then I think you're happy because, like you said, he offers no value defensively, really. Offensively, he strikes out a lot, but if you like guys and you just need pop and power in your lineup, go get Luke Voigt.
Now, the best pitcher that Stacey has listed, I find fascinating. It's Zach Greinke. Now, I thought I was under the impression that Zach Greinke was calling it quits after last year when he returned to Kansas City, but people will go broke trying to predict Zach Greinke. There will be. I will watch a 9-part Ken Burns documentary about Zach Greinke. He is just an do a hell of a lot worse than a former Cy Young Award winner and a borderline Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Greinke quietly had like a really good season last year with the Kansas City Royals. Like I thought maybe Greinke was falling off. I thought maybe he was going to be done after Houston, but like a 3.68 ERA, 137 innings pitched. And I look at his numbers from last year. I'm like, should the D-backs try to find a way to cut Madison Bumgarner and trade him, and then just bring back their old biggest free agent of all time and Zach Greinke? Because this guy can still do it for you. And if you are in need of, look, he's not your number 1 or number 2 starter no more. We all know that, but he's definitely in that Johnny Cueto tier where he's like still good, maybe not elite or an all-star, but if he's like your number 4, number 5 starter, your veteran rounding out your rotation, or maybe he even goes to a young team like he did with the Royals last year. Like I think he could put Greinke in pretty much any rotation. If you're a World Series contender that needs a number 4 or 5, put him in there. Perfect veteran presence, World Series champion, leader. He's done it all. Or if you're a young team, same things, same attributes apply. Now put him in that young rotation where you could teach those guys how to be a professional and a hardworking veteran. Like Zach Greinke can go anywhere and help out a team. Still at the age of 39. Like when this guy retires, I know we're gonna potentially still talk about the Hall of Fame later.
Yeah,
this guy, okay, this guy's definitely a Hall of Famer then.
Yeah, and I think a team like St. Louis, I think, should be falling all over themselves. Is the Cardinals are just an arm or two away from being a legit World Series contender. You bring him in. What's the worst thing that could happen? Absolutely.